Okay, so this is our class on Shaarei Kedushah, but we are going to be talking today from the Ari's Chaim Vital's explanation from Ruach HaKodesh, from the Tanya, from Shaarei Kedushah, and from the Chafetz Chaim and his volume of information on Lashon Hara, and a little bit from the Gemara and the Tractate Arikin, which bring down the history of all the things that caused the exile. And one of the major things is Lashon Hara. And so it's imperative that we correct this. And it's been so difficult to correct because we are repetitive and repetitive and repetitive, going over and over and over again. So there's a quote from Devarim Rabbah that says, the Holy One, blessed be He, said, in this world, because there was Lashon Hara amongst you, I removed my Shekhinah. Hafetz Chaim says it was Lashon Hara that caused the Jews to have the backbreaking labor that they had in Mitzrayim, that it was Lashon Hara by the sin of the spies that caused us to lose Eretz Yisrael as our land. And in his book, Shmirat HaLashon, the Hafetz Chaim, or guarding one's tongue, quotes from the Talmud, the Midrash, and the Zohar. And he says, if you really scrutinize the halachot, of which there are 31 just mitzvot, positive and negative, relating to Lashon Hara, your hair will stand on end. And in fact, when I studied this, quite a bit and taught it, I got very frustrated because there are so many laws. It's almost like you can't say anything to anybody. And as I'm rereading the introduction, he says this is one of the three reasons why it's so difficult to get above this Lashon Hara, because there are people who are scholars who look at all of the exceptions, and then there are common people who don't even know the rules, let alone the exceptions. And then there are people like me who just give it up because it's impossible, because there's so much involved that you just say, I just can't say anything anymore. So it's a very, very difficult. And what happens, according to the Zohar, and why the Torah is so severe with the sin of Lashon Hara, is because he says that there is a spirit which comes over speakers of Lashon Hara, and it's this spirit is called Sachsusha, and it's apparently it's a serpent, and when we speak this serpent prevents, even after we say the Lashon Hara and we are learning and praying, it prevents whatever the goodness and holiness that's coming out of our mouths from going up. It's kind of like our learning just stays in the air. So, and it causes death and slaughter and horrific things in the world. So he says, woe unto those who arouse this forth by not guarding their mouth and their tongue. And, this is all just because of what, can come out of your mouth. And so he goes on and says that the Yetzer Hara can get us in one of two ways. So first of all, very often it convinces you, well, it's not Lashon Hara. You have to say it to something. You have to get it off your chest. Or he says, or like I experienced it, you realize it's impossible to live constrained unless you completely just stay in your room and don't talk to anybody, and don't involve yourself with the affairs of the world. So it's this idea that even back to not just the sin of the spies and Mitzrayim, and the second temple being destroyed from Sinat Chinam, which was Lashon Hara, but also Adam Arishon, and what happened in with the snake. The snake says to Hava, did God really say not to eat from the trees of the garden. And so it began there. There's this tail bearing. So, what happens is not only when you speak Lashon Hara, but it's when you hear it. And there are so many levels because you can hear it, and if you remove yourself, then very often the person who's speaking it, if you're the only one there, won't say it because there's nobody to say it to. So there's a difference between the speaker and the listener, because the speaker transgresses a negative commandment, and he does it when both the listeners are many or few or even one person. But the listener, he can remove himself and not transgress. Um, so I'm going to just go over some of the very basic laws or the things that he brings down as being important. So one of them, and he lists all of the transgressions. There are many, 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 because it's not just the halachot of Lashon Hara, but it's, oh, we lost Judy. But it's also the idea that we're not just, it's not just those, but it's all the others. For instance, you shouldn't profane my holy name. So that's part of Lashon Hara. Or you shouldn't hate your brother in your heart. We say things, and there's a difference in what you say and what you don't say. So when someone speaks peace with his friend and denigrates him before somebody else or in front of somebody else, then there's like this opposite effect. So not only is he transgressing by saying it to somebody else, but he's hating his friend in the heart, and it's probably transgressing probably 3 or 4 other mitzvot. For instance, you shouldn't take revenge and you shouldn't bear a grudge. So when a speaker bears hatred towards somebody and asks him to, let's say you want to borrow something, and he denies that you borrow it. So in your heart, you're saying, oh boy, why didn't he give it to me? And then you may say that to somebody else. Or the minute you nurture a quarrel with someone, like if somebody brings something up and he's trying to get something, in return, he wants to, that's in and of itself transgressing. What's the transgression? And he shall not be like Korach and his congregation, which is an exhortation against nurturing a quarrel. There are many, many others. For instance, let's say, there's somebody in the family or a relative, and somebody is stopping him from doing something because of an attitude, or let's say his work isn't perfect, or he did something which bothers somebody. So, every person, according to this situation, things might be said to him in anger. They say that anger is also a result of Lashon Hara. In other words, if the actual halacha is, and you shall not wrong one man his fellow. So that's referring to verbal wronging. And it comes with anger. Sometimes and it's not just speech. It's, like rolling your eyes, or hand movements. It's not just speech. In the halachot according to the Chavetayim of Lashon Hara, include mannerisms. So even if you say something before another person or with others there, and even if the color of his face changes, it brings him shame, and that's transgressing another one. Reprove your fellow, but do not bear sin because of him. So that's another one. And then about a widow and an orphan. You shouldn't afflict a widow and an orphan. So if you make, someone's heart sad. I remember years ago, there was a woman on my street and her husband passed away. And I don't know, she mentioned to me during the week, she said hello to me, and she normally didn't know me. And I thought, I have to invite her for Shabbos, she's a widow now, and I didn't. And I still think that, that maybe I saddened her heart, because, we assume things. Maybe she thought, oh, she didn't care about me and she never, whatever. We assume a lot of things because, so there's a big punishment for doing that against widows, orphans, and people who convert also. My wrath shall burn and I shall kill you by the sword. So this is what the Torah explains as the punishment for this. And your wives will be widows and your children orphans. And sometimes you can even transgress by flattering somebody. Why? You say something, you praise someone in front of other people, and then it makes them feel bad. I mean, there's so much involved here. And so the anger, if you to me, this is where it happens mostly when, like, I get annoyed or angry at something. So if you speak lashon hara against someone in anger, like, somebody in my family will do something, like my husband usually, that really is annoying to me. So I kind of get angry. So at the same time, I'm transgressing the negative commandment of cursing him, even if I'm just thinking about it, or I say, whatever it is. And the commandment is don't curse a deaf man. The meaning isn't to curse someone who doesn't hear, but it means even a deaf man. In other words, how much more so one who isn't deaf. So basically, there are 17 negative commandments and another 15 positive. So one of them is remember what Hashem did to Miriam when you went out of Egypt. So again, the Torah is telling us, this great, the leprosy and the punishment that she got just because, and this was Miriam the Tzaddikus, who the Arizal, said her well was the one that, like, gave us all the Chokhmah of the Zohar practically, and his wisdom. So when you compare, she didn't even speak denigrating him, but she only was comparing him in essence to other Nevi'im, and she was, she didn't speak to his face to shame him, and not in public, but only to her brother. But still, and it was private, but still, and Moshe wasn't even offended by it, but still, she was punished with leprosy. So, because it's, we're also transgressing, you should love your neighbor like yourself when we say anything, about another friend. And sometimes the mitzvah of in righteousness, you should judge a neighbor. How many times do we, I mean, even just in our thoughts, these thoughts come in, why did she throw the trash out the door? Or, and sometimes you might even utter some words. And then there's, it's not just saying things that are untrue either. Lashon hara includes reckless, saying things that are true. For instance, if the transgression of your brother grows poor and his hand falls with you, then you should uphold him. In other words, and he should live with you. So if you see someone who's poor, who needs food, who needs clothing, who needs a place to live, either you give him a gift or a loan, or you go into partnership with him. But the idea is that if even through this lashon hara, you lower him by having him lose his parnasa, it's a huge transgression. Also, if you're in the Beis Midrash or you're learning with someone, and or during tefillah, how many times you go into, a synagogue and people are talking? It's the same thing because it's forbidden to talk and to laugh and to joke and to converse. According to the Shulchan Aruch, my sanctuary shall you fear, and that the house of study is included in that. So if you're standing before someone who spoke lashon hara, or if it was an elder or somebody that you demeaned, face to face, then if it's an elderly person, it's another transgression. You shall honor the face of the elder. I read last week that we're supposed to stand up for people who are over 70. how many times, did that happen? Did anybody ever stand up for us? If you're over 70, it's like not heard of these days.
If you get on the bus, maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And you shall honor the face of the elder. Um, Honor is referring to honoring with words. Then what if you're saying something to a Kohen? And you demean a Kohen? Then you're adding another transgression. It's just not about lashon hara, but it's also about dishonoring the Kohen, right? We're supposed to sanctify the Kohen. So if you are not giving him honor, then you're not sanctifying him. You're speaking lashon hara or lechlos against him, and you're shaming him. Then you're not doing honor by him, and so it's another transgression. Um, so if it's your older brother or sister or your mother's husband or his father's wife, you're also dishonoring the commandment of the mitzvah of honor your father and your mother, because it's included in this. So in all of these transgressions and in all of these, mitzvahs taseh, of which there are many, it's all just because of the words that come out of our mouth, we're transgressing. And the mitzvah of just think about the mitzvah of learning, which is such an enormous mitzvah, right? And it's an absolute positive commandment, right? We've learned about this. It's in Sefer Mitzvot and the Rambam, and there's no limit to the reward that we get, right? But what happens when we don't do that because we're talking to somebody or we're giving gossip or we're neglecting things. So it says in Parkei Delia, no, in Pticha Da'aicha Rabbah says the Holy One overlooks things, idolatry sometimes, illicit relations, spilling of blood, but he does not overlook the sin of neglect of Torah. Why? Because there's always some way that we can fulfill the obligation to study. And you don't have to be idle from learning, even if you look for 5 minutes at the parsha or a pasuk in the Tanya. Um, and so there's no reason why we should be speaking lashon hara instead. It's just as easy to pick up a book and learn something from the Torah. So basically, if each word of the Torah fulfills a mitzvah, which is what he's saying, think of all the words that you've learned and how important that is, as opposed to all the punishments that happen from lashon hara. So, it's very, very important. And also, if you're speaking and it's good and evil mixed and it's intermixed, then you're also transgressing, because there's another transgression that says from a thing of falsehood keep far. So the same thing about motzi shem ra, which spreads the bad name for a person. It's all more severe, in general than anything else. And we see how it historically is keeping us in this exile. So when it says, and you should walk in his ways, we are commanded to emulate the traits of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And they're all good. And if we want to have Ruach HaKodesh and Nevuah and behold in some way, the divine presence, whether it's looking at the stars or the sea or a flower, we're not going to get it because what David HaMelech wrote to him, you are not a God who desires wickedness. Evil will not dwell with you. So if we habituate ourselves to lashon hara, then that's where we're going to be. And it's a very repetitive thing, very repetitive. And we're so used to it all around. I mean, all you have to do is just go out in the street for 5 minutes and you'll hear it everywhere. And so it's very, very difficult. And sometimes, it's you just have to step back from it. However, and I'm just going to kind of ease into the Tanya here. The Alter Rebbe tells us that in our heart of every Jew, is this yearning. It's our birthright to fight the Yetzer Hara and to not speak Lashon Hara. And he quotes, "It's very near to us." So the question is, how do we do it? And he says that it's our birthright. It's who we are because of Abraham and Yitzhak and Yaakov, that it has come to us. It's the hidden love inside of all Jews. And it's an inheritance. We have it. It may not be from our parents or our grandparents or even our great-grandparents, but our avot, we have it from our avot, every Jewish person. So we already have this in us. All we really have to do is arouse it and implement it by observing the mitzvot and getting past the Yetzer Hara, which is there to really help us have free choice and gain the rewards. So he talks in chapter 18, he tells us how the Avos were the chariot with the Merkava of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And they merited the privilege because they were God's Ratzon, came through them. They drew down for all subsequent generations, not just after them, not just by the Second Temple, not, now in 2025, for this generation, they drew down forever the Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, the souls from all the 10 holy Sfirot that came from the Ein Sof, right, from all the four worlds. In all of these four worlds, they drew down this holiness, which is in us. And this is our natural heart. This is naturally what we want. And he says that each person is according to his level and according to his deeds. What's his level mean? It's the root of our soul. Everybody has a different root for many reasons, but that root is connected to a tzaddik or an avot, and through that root and through our deeds, we climb up and we complete all the tikkun of the nefesh and then the tikkun of the ruach until our soul is incomplete. And until all the Jewish nation does this rectification, Mashiach isn't going to come. So we're doing it, and we see, where is this light coming from? It's coming from the Ein Sof, but it's garbed in Chochmah, in the sphera of Chochmah. And where is Chochmah? It's in our neshama. It's in our soul. Chochmah is in the body. Okay, it's not intellect, but it's in our body. So when he says the light of the Ein Sof is garbed in the faculty of Chochmah in the human soul, whatever sort of a Jew we are, the baseless sinner of the lowest level has Chochmah in his neshama because he's a Jew. And together, that Chochmah with the light of the Ein Sof that's dressed up in it goes to all the levels of its soul in all of its entirety from head to foot. And that's a pretty big statement. I mean, that we have to, and we kind of forget that. And so everything below Chochmah, right, is we have Bina and all the emotions and the understanding and the comprehending. But what do we have above Chochmah? So we have the soul's lower faculties, but the light of the Ein Sof is above Chochmah, is this faculty that cannot be comprehended, that we cannot get with our intellect, and we can't grasp it. And that's the connection that our soul has to the essence of the Ein Sof. And that's why the Ein Sof cannot be comprehended by anything we think or study or learn. It's just not possible. We can connect in the way of our intellect, which we're trying to do by learning Torah and doing mitzvot. But the faith that we have, that we're building, is beyond Chochmah and comprehension. And so that's why it says in Mishlei, the fool believes everything, but the clever man understands. So when we do a transgression, shtut, the foolishness that's temporarily taking over us, is 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 something that only happens up until the level of chokhmah. Beyond chokhmah, the faith of a Jew is always there, and that's why the Alter Rebbe says any Jew will always be prepared to sacrifice their life as though it was not possible to renounce Hashem without any reason or logical argument. In other words, the innate soul of a Jew knows and has the essence of God and faith in them. So, because we understand that there's one God who's illuminating our faith and our soul, and because it comes down and is clothed in Chokhmah, which we can't know or grasp, that regardless of our level, we're willing or ready to sacrifice our life rather than say there is no God. So we just have to remember that our soul is connected to this illogical, not based in knowledge or intelligence, but beyond the grasp of rational intelligence. And that's the nature of the soul's faculty of Chokhmah. That's our nature. And when we see this nature, this hidden love that we have, and our longing and yearning to be connected with our source, the Alter Rebbe goes on and says, what is the word Kodesh? Kodesh is Chokhmah. So, and Kedusha refers to anything that comes down from Chokhmah. So when we are Kadosh, we're nullifying ourselves and we're just believing. And then when we do the mitzvot, then we are in Kedusha. And so when we talked previously about the Ein Sof and the Sphirot and then the souls of humans, we see how it comes through the Sphirot of Chokhmah into our soul. And then he says that, it's clothed in it, but it's very often hidden and in the state of exile in us, in the Yetzer Hara. So, and the Klipa, which we talked about last time in the left side of the heart. So I just want to bring one more thing that he says in Tanya about loving Hashem and having Yirat Hashem. He says that it stems from this idea about God's unity and oneness. So we said about, we sacrifice life because we can't imagine a world that isn't our creator, because everything is God's being. Everything is in God's being. We can't imagine you can't look at the stars and the sea, and the intricacy of all the categories of creation without getting that, that this is God. And there's nothing logical about it. It's beyond logic. So he says that it's so much easier to just subdue that desire for an extra gallon of ice cream or an extra, whatever it is, an extra word to say to your husband, just, lip it, just, it's so much easier to do that because that is much lighter suffering than death. And by death, he's referring to, the being torn away from God. He's saying it's easier to subdue our evil inclination. And how do we do it? We do it by teshuva on one hand, and yet, some people say, so I'll do an avera and then I'll do teshuva. Do an avera, no. The teshuva has to be real, and because of that, then. So the last thing I want to point is a point he makes up, that he says the divine light, this Ein Sof, which is dressed up in our souls, doesn't come from the realm of time, right? So it's beyond time. It transcends time. and therefore it's eternal. And this is the connection that I think we kind of always try and get to, this, this eternality, this infinity that that kind of rules and dominates time, not the opposite. So because the divine light is enclosed in the soul and it transcends and dominates time, there's no way it can be separated from God, right? No matter how short, no matter what transgression we do, we can't be separated. And so we have to continue strengthening ourselves against this evil nature, which is either depression or anxiety or whatever the whole world is going through now. And it's from this element that we previously discussed, from the four sodot of air, water, earth, and fire. It's the earth element, which is in everything. So when we labor in Torah, with concentration, we kind of it helps us. It helps us fight this yetzer. And the same thing with prayer, even just talking to Hashem, and the same thing with tzedakah. Whatever we're doing, when we train ourselves to keep doing it, and we're constantly struggling. And the people who are stronger seekers and want or yearn more, they very often struggle more with the evil inclination. Right? So it's easy to resist, but we have to remember that it's much easier than accepting a pain of separation, which, God forbid, couldn't even happen. So, okay, so we're going to go now. Nechama we're going to go to the text of Shaarei Kedushah, which is bringing up, now we're in the part 3, we're in the 4th gate. And again, he's bringing up the conditions for prophecy with refining our midot. So I'm going to share the screen so we can see the Hebrew while Nechama reads it, and then we'll translate.
Okay, בתנאי הנבואה בקיצור גדול, כבר נתבאר שיש פגמים ופוגמים בנפש צומחת, ויש בחיה ויש במדברת, ויש בסקלית, וצריך לזקק את כולם. אם כן, צריך תהילה שישוב בתשובה גמור מכל מיני עבירות או מידות רעות, ולא ישוב עוד אליהן כלל. ואחר כך יזהר לקיים כל מה שאפשר בזמן הזה מהרמ"ח מצוות עושה כמו שאמרנו בהלק ראשון. Do you want to start? Do you want to?
Sure. So this is the discussion about the conditions of prophecy. So he's explaining what, basically what we have to do, and he's reviewing the 4 different parts of the universe. We have the domain, we have, which is the metals and the sand and the stones, things that are immaterial. And then we have the tzomeach, which are the plants, and then we have the speaking animals, and then then we have animals, and then we have the speaking man. So he's saying that there are conditions, and there are damages done at each level. So if we are eating something that's treif, that damages, if it's a vegetable, it damages the koach someach, the power that we have in this vegetative soul. And let's say we do something against an animal, then it's the koach of the animal. So these are the damages done to the souls of each of these categories, and we have to clean up all of it. First, he said we have to do teshuva from all the sins or the bad character traits that we have, and not return to them at all, and kind of unplug the spiritual tubes that we've stuffed up. But if you try to fulfill the positive commandments while the sins aren't rectified, then the klipot will attach to the sins, and it'll suck the holiness from us. and entice us more to sin. But he's saying that, so in essence, it's like trying to fill a bucket that has holes in it. First we have to fulfill the 248 positive mitzvot, obviously the ones that we can, and then have fixed times during the day.
Okay, I didn't go that far yet.
Okay, ahakach.
Okay. שהם לקבוע עתים לתורה ביום בלילה ולא יגרע אפילו יום אחד. להתפלל בכוונה שלמה 3 תפילותיי בכל יום, ולקיים ברכות המזון וכל מיני ברכות הנהנים בכוונה, ולכבד השבת בכל פרטיו, ולקיים ואהבת לרעך כמוך בלב שלם, ולקיים קריאת שמע בציצית ותפילין בתפילותיו, אחר כך יזהר שלא יטע כלל בשום מצווה שסהה לא, the 365 לא תעשה, ואפילו בדקדוקי סופרים ובפרט מאלו לכל היבא כריתות והיבא מיתה בידי שמיים והיבא מיתות בית דין ומה שאר הלבן יזהר בפרט מאלו. Okay, and then it goes on. Okay, you want to?
Mirechla v'loshen hara. Just finish the.
Okay, Merekilus uloshen hara v'sicha betela sicha betela ulitzsanut v'histalkut be'ariot u'mekol minei keri u'mekol minei karov al hanida u'mishpua afilu be'emet b'shmirat Shabbat yoter min hakol.
Okay, so he's listing, more practical things. He's saying you have to fix a time for Torah study during the day and night, and don't even miss one day. Nobody says you have to study for 3 hours, but at least 5 or 10 minutes. Start, and to pray with complete kavanah 3 times a day. Obviously, this isn't our obligation, but minimally. Say Shema twice a day and maybe read a parak of Tehillim or Shmona Esrei. Say Birkat HaMazon and the brachas with kavana. When you make a bracha. No. Think about what you're saying. And honor the Shabbos and all its details. Love your fellow as yourself with a complete heart. Fulfill the Shema, and then, for men, tzitzis and tefillin. And then, don't do any of the 365 transgressions, even, derabanan, even what the sages say. Be scrupulous about what we do, and especially about those transgressions which are karet, which entail the punishment of cutting off. Or death from heaven or the Beit Din, and from all the other negative things, from slander, loshen hara, idle speech. So this is from air, the blah, 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 the gossip, and what do they have at Costco, and what do they have at what are they selling at the super today? It's just like this idle talk, frivolity, staring at women, wasting seed, nida. Making an oath, saying, a swear, even if it's for something true. And above everything, lishmor Shabbat. Shabbat is in its category of itself. And be proper of all the improper, be careful of all the improper midot or character traits, because they're the ones that have the foundation souls of the tzomech, the earth, the water, the air, and the fire. The tzomech, the domain that somech, the chaya, and the midaberet. So we have to, guard ourselves, and especially, from arrogance to the opposite extreme. Did we get here yet? I don't think you got here yet. Shabbat. Yeah.
Okay. Are we going to have time to do all this so that it will, because I want to do the Shaarei Kedushah. Should we?
Yeah. So I'll just finish it in the English, and then we'll do the Ruach HaKodesh.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So the rest of it is he's saying, He's giving the halachas that gava is it's such a taiva. It's like it's my really bad one because my thoughts, I'll think something, and the minute it's in your thoughts, so then you have to thank God I'm at the level I'm stopping it at my thought and I'm not speaking it or acting it, but still you don't want it in your thought. He says that you should go to the extreme to the point where everybody is like walking over you, until you don't feel the difference between being honored and not being shamed. So in other words, he's telling us we have to be to the point where we don't look for anything and we're just accepting everything the way it is. They should be equal. We shouldn't feel joy from one who honors us or shame from one who insults us. And of course, we have to guard ourselves from anger, because there's nothing that prevents Ruach HaKodesh more than anger, and from irritation and sadness, even from your family, unless, obviously it's something that is, unless you're grieving or whatever for a reason. And then he just says that prophecy doesn't rest, for a minute, even for one who's worthy, if there's sadness. This is how important being B'Simcha is. And we have to be content with our portion, even when we're suffering. Because it says you will love Hashem with both your hearts, which is the evil inclination and the good inclination. And then toil with all our strength in Torah, completely lishma, with complete intention. Give nachas to God only. As it says in Tehillim, I'm joyful in your commandments, like one who finds a great treasure. Because through this, we will bring the Shefa down from the spiritual world. But the main thing is, every second, to have this Yirat Hashem in order that we don't sin. And when we have Hashem Keneged Tamid in front of us, then we will cling to him and we won't even think not to. It won't be an option. Okay, so Nechama, do you want to open up the Sefer Midot or the Ruach?
Yeah, I was just maybe I'll do some of the Shaarei Kedushah and then end with Sefer Midot.
Okay, this time,
Okay.
good. Okay, great.
Okay, so it's really good that we have this background that of purifying, refining our characters through purification of speech and through kavanas and through where we put our attention, where we it's so important to create this basis so that we could know, because why are we here? We're all like interested in prophecy, interested in Ruach HaKodesh, because like we're at a point in the process of Geula, like we want to know what's going on, like we want meaning in what's going on. I was just recently reading on Shabbat, this article by Rav Ginsburg talking, analyzing these different philosophers and how he was saying the Lubavitcher Rebbe was really into Viktor Frankl, and like he thought he was one of the better psychologists, and he was saying that the whole thing was the search for meaning, like this, and our generation is really searching for meaning, like what's going on here, like we're all suffering from anxiety and we can't even look at the news anymore. It's too mind-blowing. So there's this place in our soul, especially now that we're searching for some other message to come down and help guide us, to help, I think we're all like yearning for that's why we're even here, like even discussing this. It's like we want to know what's going on, why, like, or just to open to get a message to help us through the day or through the week. So anyway, with that said, I want to go back into the Sefer of Shaarei Kedushah, and here we're saying that I'm going to read a little bit, and I don't know if I'll read it all in the Hebrew, but I'll explain. והנה סוד הנבואה ברוח קודש ודאי שהוא כל שולח מלמעלה לדיבר עם הנביא ההוא או עם בעל הרוח הקודש ההוא, אבל אותו הקול העליון הרוחני אי אפשר הקול ההוא לבדו להתגשם. Okay, so he's talking about both, he's comparing actually both Nebuah and Ruach HaKodesh, that there's this voice that comes from above. And it's this Kol Elyon, it needs to materialize and to enter into the ears of the Navi by way of enclothing itself first in the voice, the physical voice that comes out of the person who's receiving the Nebuah. And it's the same voice that is involved with Torah and Tefillah, etc. So this voice that is enclosed and or connects with this person and comes into the ear. So the first voice that comes out from his learning and his everything is comes from the angels and the Ruchim Kadishim, like the Holy Spirits, and that itself is like the call of the Nevuah. Okay. Ukashabaha kol hahu ala adam lagid lo nevuah hahi hu ba mitlavesh b'zeh kol gashmi shel akshav shel adam hazeh sheyotz mimenu bi'et shashor alai b'nevuah. So it goes into his physical voice. Now he was saying before, and which is a really important point, this whole process of this kind of inspiration of Nevuah and Ruach Kodesh, he starts to distinguish between them. So we would think that, you know, the Ruach HaKodesh is a bit of like, it's like kind of on a lower level than prophecy. And he says, "V'hinei ha'hefesh sheyesh bein nevuah l'ruach hakodesh hu ki nevuah medukra." First, he's saying that nevuah is from the masculine, and ruach hakodesh is feminine. So then he's saying that nevuah is from the voice that speaks and passes between a person and of a sadikim acharim, who clothe the voice in the person who's receiving the nevuah. The nevuah, the ingredient of the nevuah is that there's actually a passing of this voice from a sadik. And this is a really key point, because I was learning this and I was struggling with it. It seemed, because he's saying later, just a little later on, he's saying, but Ruach HaKodesh is when there's this, okay, let me just stop with one thing. There's three levels of this passing. There's the hevel, the kol, and the dibur. There's vapor, the voice, like just like the sound, and then the actual speech. And these three components of this passing of message, right, goes either from a tzaddik to the person, and that's he classifies it as nevuah, or it can come from between bein mishel acharim, between people, and that's the level of ruach hakodesh. Like, I think that's more like what I'm trying to understand. What does that mean? I think it's like maybe when we get clairvoyant or just kind of, I don't like to use the word psychic, but just kind of like a connection that's beyond the ordinary, or a message, or you feel like some kind of communication beyond the ordinary between people.
Can I break in for 1 second?
Yeah.
Just that that the person has to be refined enough to get it, and it's always from a tzaddik who
That's for
is
the
connected
nevuah.
to the root, who's
Right,
connected to the root of your soul. So
right.
that's a point. So you wonder why you have, like a an affinity for the Lubavitcher Rebbe or for
Yeah, so it's really important that we connect to the tzaddikim. That's the point. It's really important that we're studying what we just did with Menucha on all the laws of lashon hara and all the kavanas and all the ways we can keep refining ourselves to God willing. We reach these levels, but we still it's really important that that in the Arizal is saying here that the level of Ruach HaKodesh, which isn't as high as Nebuah, is between, not necessarily, it's not really Sadiqim, but when we connect through our, say we're really into Limud of Rebbe Nachman or the Lubavitcher Rebbe, or we have an actual kesher with a Sadiq, um, and there's that kind of subtle communication happening, that's the ingredient of nevuah, we do have to be attached to um that person, that's neshama, that has reached those levels that we were just talking about striving for in order to refine our ability to receive these levels. There's a lot of I think controversy of can we receive nubuah now, or I had a whole debate once in a class a couple of years ago that one a very learned Chabad woman was saying that the Rebbe says yes, we can receive nubuah now. I don't know. There's a lot. I mean, we have to be honest with our own level and where we're at, and I think there's levels of Ruach HaKodesh for sure we can reach, especially when we, through the mitzvot and through this, hitrata dilatata, this work of tshuva of these really refined levels. But the main thing he's saying here is that the kol or dibor, that the voice or the speech that passes between someone and the sadikim achrim, this is not Ruach HaKodesh, this is Nevuah. This is the level so that he's merely making a distinction, and the distinction, mamash, is that ingredient of having to have a real soul connection. If either it's from, as we know, our neshamas are very complex, and we have many nitzutzot and of many of the avot and the imaot, but it's really important that we can consciously connect with either a tzaddik that's connected with our soul root, or that we have an obvious affinity to, and how that's going to manifest as we learn more and more, and how we're going to experience these things. God willing, we're going to be more open and more of a vessel to receive these messages. So again, I was thinking a lot today. I started saying before how I'm just going to get the save for me note ready here. Why are we doing this? Why is it so important? It's something we can ask ourselves. Why do we want to have nevuah, or why would we want to be know what it is? Why do we want to be in touch with it? I mean, the Shaarei Ruach HaKodesh, he says it's to help keep us straight. Like in the past, with the biggest prophets, they were warning us, what could happen. We have to remember the prophecy is warning. It's really important, and Menucha and I were discussing this before, how our speech, somebody said to me, today, these mystics are saying we're going to have a big war. Okay, so then so Menucha was saying, yeah, so the prophet said that too. But prophecies are warnings, and we have to even though there's this possibility for Mashiach every day. Why are we given the mitzvah of believing in that Mashiach could come in any day? Is because that's that also that energy we're putting in to co-create with Hashem a positive outcome. So all this work we're doing, I think, is not to expect a disaster or a big war. I mean, Hashem shall protect us all, and we really have to strengthen each other. But that fineness of lashon and how we say things and how we think of things, and just to stay present in the moment and to really just cleave to Hashem through all of this limud, through all of the mitzvot, through all the Talmud Torah, mamash. I think it's really crucial right now, and like we don't, some of us, as a protection, don't realize we're on the brink of something very big, and we want to tip the scales. We want to tip the scales. So with maybe we'll just end off with a Sefer Midot. It says, Misha rotza lidibek et atzmo beHashem yitbarach ad sheyilech b'machshavato v'hekal al hekal v'ra'eh et hechalot be'enei hasechel yishmor et atzmo melamed sheker afilu bat ha'ud. A person who wants to attach himself to the Holy One so that his thoughts travel from one chamber to the next, seeing these chambers with his mind's eye, should avoid speaking falsely, even accidentally. So he's talking, really emphasizing truth now. One is permitted to distort the truth in order to preserve peace. Okay, so that's
an
exception.
Yeah, it's one of those exceptions.
Yeah, and we have to be very careful. Yeah. Those who tell lies are not worthy of receiving the divine presence. That's from Sefer Midot. So we have to really be strong about not lying, even if we feel it's going to protect us. If it really is, that's one thing. But I don't know. What's the protection? Our protection is our connection with Hashem. So that's a bearer we have to do. A tzaddik is permitted to act deceitfully with one who deceives others.
Can you say that again? A tzaddik?
A tzaddik is permitted to act deceitfully with one who deceives others.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's.
But we have to understand that, the Menucha, I was watching one of his shiurim, that tzaddikim, we can't even really relate to the level that, that they're on when we think of, Miriam getting punished for Lashon Hara. I mean, Miriam, or
What comes
Moshe
to my mind
Rabbeinu.
here, but what comes to my mind here is Yaakov Avinu. Like, he had to deal with Esav, and that was his whole. He was such a man of truth, Yaakov Avinu. But it says here, a tzaddik is permitted to act deceitfully with one who deceives others. So when he wrestled with
Tzaddik is allowed to.
yeah, well, Yaakov Avinu, I think.
As a tzaddik.
Yeah, exactly. So when
we can't even conceptualize what a tzaddik is even.
What his level, yeah. But that's why he had, one of the reasons he had to wrestle with the angel of Esav is to clear his conscience. There was still a part of him that was not whole with having deceived and stolen the birthright. And then when he wrestled with the angel of Esav and he was blessed, then it was like he was clear. It was like now he was Israel. Now he was Yashar with Hashem. Like he was. This is something. This is not a small thing for a tzaddik to do this. But we learned from Yaakov Avinu that from what his whole struggle was, he was a man of truth, and he had to come to reconcile what the mitzvah here is saying. He was actually. You're able to do. You're able to act deceitfully with one who deceives others. But again, that's Yaakov Avinu's level, and we have to be careful with our, of course, with our actions.
I just wanted to, because we're over an hour, just
okay.
Just to open it up.
We can do the rest of the next time.
Yeah, for 5 minutes.
Yeah,
if
sure.
Has any questions about what we said, and I'll stop the recording.
Or can I ask another question too? Was there anyone,